Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Preface. This book summarizes, for a general audience, decades of research on the positive aspects of human experience, joy, creativity, the process of total involvement with life I call flow. To take this step is somewhat dangerous because as soon as one strays from the stylized constraints of academic prose, it is easy to become careless or overly enthusiastic about such a topic. What follows, however, is not a popular book that gives insider tips about how to be happy. To do so would be impossible in any case, since a joyful life is an individual creation that cannot be copied from a recipe. This book tries instead to present general principles, along with concrete examples of how some people have used these principles to transform boring and meaningless lives into ones full of enjoyment. There is no promise of easy shortcuts in these pages, but for readers who care about such things, there should be enough information to make possible the transition from theory to practice. In order to make the book as direct and user-friendly as possible, I have avoided footnotes, references, and other tools scholars usually employ in their technical writing. I have tried to present the results of psychological research and the ideas derived from the interpretation of such research in a way that any educated reader can evaluate and apply to his or her own life, regardless of specialized background knowledge. However, for those readers who are curious enough to pursue the scholarly sources on which my conclusions are based, I have included extensive notes at the end of the volume. They are not keyed to specific references, but to the page number in the text where a given issue is discussed. For example, happiness is mentioned on the very first page. The reader interested in knowing what works I base my assertions on can turn to the notes section beginning, and by looking under the reference, find a lead to Aristotle's view of happiness, as well as to contemporary research on this topic, with the appropriate citations. The notes can be read as a second, highly compressed and more technical shadow version of the original text. At the beginning of any book, it is appropriate to acknowledge those who have influenced its development. In the present case, this is impossible, since the list of names would have to be almost as long as the book itself. However, I owe special gratitude to a few people who I wish to take this opportunity to thank. First of all, Isabella, who as wife and friend has enriched my life for over 25 years, and whose editorial judgment has helped shape this work. Mark and Christopher, our sons, from whom I have learned perhaps as much as they have learned from me. Jacob Getzel, my once and future mentor. Among friends and colleagues, I should like to single out Donald Campbell, Howard Gardner, Gene Hamilton, Philip Hefner, Hiroyuki Imamura, David Kipper, George Klein, Fausto Massimini, Elizabeth Nola Newman, Jerome Singer, James Stigler, and Brian Sutton-Smith, all of whom in one way or another have been generous with their help, inspiration, or encouragement. Of my former students and collaborators, Ronald Graff, Robert Kuby, Reed Larson, Gene Nakamura, Kevin Rathenday, Rick Robinson, Ikuya Sato, Sam Whalen, and Maria Wong have made the greatest contributions to the research underlying the ideas developed in these pages. John Brockman and Richard P. Cott have given their skillful professional support to this project and have helped it along from start to finish. Last but not least, indispensable over the past decade has been the funding generously provided by the Spencer Foundation to collect and analyze the data. I am especially grateful to its former president, H. Thomas James, to its present one, Lawrence A. Cremin, and to Marian Faldette, vice president of the foundation.
Of course, none of those mentioned above are responsible for what might be unsound in the book. That is exclusively my own doing. Chicago, March 1990.